Erik ten Hag under Manchester United, I cannot see a future where this can end well. And due to a lack of assertiveness, due to a lack of having any clear plan, and being completely too cautious, they're just going to do the same thing all over again. Now, Erik ten Hag is a manager which I at first really wanted to back, because in my opinion he is someone that I see as a disciplinarian. I think Manchester United needed that, someone to take control of the club. The player power was getting too much and he could stamp his authority, and we saw that. We saw the players that typically took control, took the reins, took the no longer did, and players that no longer fell in line left the club. I felt like having that in place, I think, was good, and I liked the idea of Erik ten Hag. However, now we're into our third season and we are not seeing really any progress. We're not. To clarify, I am not a Manchester United fan. I am simply someone from the outside. I'm a Burnley fan. I'm not in top six. I'm not biased towards United. I'm saying it how I see it. Erik ten Hag still doesn't have a real style of play, and if he does, it seems to only last for about 20 minutes a game, and in the rest of the game it's all over the place. And we can see the pressure is coming to him quite a lot here. In his post-match presser against Liverpool, a journalist said, "What makes you confident that it's the players that are the problem and not your coaching?" And Ten Hag had a back and forth with this journalist which didn't come across very well. Ten Hag tried to dig him out, saying, "So, explain to me about which mistakes you make," which the journalist doubled down, saying, "Well, constantly turning the ball over in your own half, playing the ball out from the back, getting mugged and chances coming off the back of it, counter-attacks when you're outnumbered, and giving up endless chances in your own stadium against a team that are your biggest rivals." In which Ten Hag laughed at him, saying, "Are you sure? I don't think so, otherwise you wouldn't win trophies as we did. I am sorry for you." He even made a strange remark, saying that after they beat Man City that they won the most trophies in English football, as if that's got anything to do with himself really. But I get the point. He's got confidence in himself, which he should. However, this just comes across as a bit naive. If multiple publications, multiple fans, multiple journalists are still saying into your third season about what your style of play is, then that is a big problem, as when you can see other teams have a new manager and they immediately get an idea of their style of play. If it's Slot at Liverpool, if it's Ange at Spurs, if it's Huzel at Brighton, and many others, the fact there's even still a conversation is the problem in itself. After last night against Twente, that means that Manchester United have only won one of their last 9 European games. That's in Champions League and also the Europa League. Only one win at home against FC Copenhagen, which even that was completely risky at best. Since then, they've been absolutely pathetic in European competitions, and let's be real, we would not be surprised if they don't even get through the Europa League qualifying phase in the top 8. Erik ten Hag comes across as a cold manager to me, and that could work well in your favour if you have the backing behind you. And this is where your opinion and mine may differ. He has won 2 trophies. One of them was in the Carabao Cup, seemingly a comfortable run to the final, and in the final was Newcastle. But then the big one, the FA Cup final against Man City, which for me could maybe be seen as more of a curse than a blessing, because they won a trophy, they beat their rivals, absolutely. However, it means that they can now go through another season, in my opinion, stagnating. Comment down below your thoughts on Erik ten Hag. If you're a United fan, please tell me, what do you guys think? I'll do this video every 6 months until I see some change, because right now I'm not seeing it. So comment down below your thoughts, like, subscribe, and Mazola Designs for the best football prints, all made by myself. Use code MUFC for 15% off all items, because I'm as confused as you guys are. And the thing is, football is tribal, so there will be people that's very pro Ten Hag and very anti Ten Hag, and you'll find this with particularly United, because it almost comes with a cycle of PTSD where they're so used to the past of just replacing managers and not really going any further, that I understand why people would want to stick with Erik ten Hag, because they feel like, well, who are we going to replace him with? Because right now we're doing okay. but if we replace him with someone else, we could just get worse, which I get. And maybe you want to give a manager time. People using the example of Mikel Arteta. Well, Arsenal, they gave him time through a tough period, and look at where they are now. However, you can see during that rough time period that they were trying a completely different way of football, much more expansive, and you can see the players that he had at the time wasn't really his players. He was dealing with what he had. Now you can definitely say that these are now Erik ten Hag's players. He's been backed, and the style of football has not really changed. And yes, there has been times that they have played a bit better. However, that seems to only last for a short time period, usually in the first half. And in the second half, everything completely falls to pieces and is completely flat. Flat is how I describe Man United. Completely. You find them falling through the same cycles time and time again. Ten Hag and his presser after the 1-1 draw against FT20 came out questioning the mentality of his players, which for me is kind of digging out your players, because for me, when it comes to mentality, that should really come from the manager. To build an atmosphere, build a culture, that means that you would give 100% for your team, for your players, every single game. And to give Ten Hag his due, he did say that I also have to look in the mirror as well. I am part of it. He is part of the problem. And fair play for him for saying that. Now, could it be a factor that players may not be as pumped up for the Europa League in comparison to Champions League? You can maybe say that. However, at the same time, they wasn't really pumped up for the Champions League either when they were in it last season. They were pathetic at times. Let's not forget they finished bottom of their group that featured Bayern, fair enough, Copenhagen and Galatasaray. Bottom of that group with only one win, and that was dodgy win against Copenhagen at home, which led to a 90th minute save by Onana from a penalty. They lost 4-3 collapsing away in Copenhagen. They fell apart at home to Galatasaray, losing 3-2. So even in the big European nights, they still weren't up for it. So what is a problem? Well, last year is different to this year. Last year, from what I found, is that Man United were playing at times probably even worse than what they are doing now. However, they got just completely bailed out by moments of magic on an almost weekly basis. You got players pulling out the bag, scoring screamers, and United was just known as individual brilliance FC. That they literally just survived on having quality players, world-class quality at times. However, that only shows up within 5 minutes of a game, and that could be enough to get a goal, and that can get them over the line in the game. That's why you find that United typically are not a high-scoring team. They typically only win games by a goal or so, because they don't score goals. And this can be proven by the stats. Last season, United were 9th, joint with Crystal Palace for the amount of goals scored with 57. And the issue is there's a massive gap ahead of them, where there's West Ham ahead of them in 8th with 60 goals, but then Spurs is 74 goals. So there's a 17 goal gap between United in 9th and Spurs in 7th. And then of course there's Villa, Chelsea and Newcastle ahead of them. And there's not that much of a gap between United and teams like Luton, who Luton scored only 5 goals less than United last season. Luton Town scored only 5 goals less than Manchester United. That's a bit of a problem. And in this campaign, it's continuing when they've only scored 5 goals this season so far. By the way, the same amount as Everton. But they typically get away because they have a pretty good defense. Onana has been pretty good in the last couple of months. And defensively, last year they had a lot of injury issues, and that seems to be carrying over again this campaign as well. Who's the main man that brought in goals for United, or created goals for United for the last 4 years? Bruno Fernandes. He's been a massive part of debate for the last few weeks now, that Bruno is not performing. And that's a big problem, because he is the main engine of Man United, and he has to be. He's clearly lacking confidence. His passes is off a lot of times. He usually has a lot of more riskier passes, trying to open and create a chance. However, even them aren't coming through anymore, and his normal passing play is also off as well. First touch isn't the greatest, he's rarely even shooting, and if he is, it's usually off target. Nothing is going right for Bruno right now, and that is an issue. You got Xerxes up top, who's learning his trade at Man United. You got Diallo, who's still a young kid. You got Rashford, who's been inconsistent for about 5 years now. You got Garnacho, that again, young kid, and still waiting for that click to go through to the next level. So you've got inconsistency throughout the entire 11 here, which leads to why they're not scoring goals. In just last night's game against FC Twente, he lost the ball 19 times, sometimes in really bad positions. And the main issue is that Erik Ten Hag clearly trusts him so much that even when he's playing poorly, he still keeps him on. So even in that game, he wasn't subbed off and was actually pushed out to the wing, which for me makes even less sense because he is always really bad as a winger. But he still kept him on the pitch. But in defense of Bruno, he's played a lot of football in the last couple of years. I'm pretty sure in terms of the stats, in terms of minutes played, he's played more than really anyone because he's never injured and he always plays a full 90. He's never subbed off. So in terms of Bruno, I can understand why he may come across as jaded or tired because he should be. He's played a lot of high-level football at a very high level, and in terms of that, not just high level, but also high pressure as well. And he did perform a lot, and he was there a lot in the first couple of seasons. But right now, I think it's really catching up to him. And this leads to this conversation of, are we just waiting for it to click at United? That things will start coming together? And I just think it's the same cycle all over again. So here's the issue. If Ten Hag was to go, who would you bring in? Now, that's a big question, because the issue is we've gone through this a lot of times. Right now, who's available? There's the likes of a Thomas Tuchel, who I think could be actually pretty good for Man United. You may disagree, but I think he's not a bad option. He's someone that's got the experience, that's won big trophies, and also has the kind of the charismatic nature to be a Manchester United manager. At Bayern, was he great? Obviously not. They didn't win the Bundesliga or even any trophy, which in itself is probably somewhat of a disgrace. They still did make it to a Champions League semi-final and just got a shock result in the cup. That would be who I would pick as the United manager. That I think would be better than what they have right now. Because what we do know right now is that Ten Hag, it's looking like they're not going any further. And that's just my opinion. You may think completely differently, but that's the way I see it. And this is the thing, right, is that if the club was willing to sack Ten Hag, after that FA Cup final, before the result, and to keep with him afterwards, and maybe they couldn't find a better option and they didn't get their first choice or second choice, or they're stuck with what they have, I just think that it means that his position at United is always going to be on the edge, and that there's always this feeling between the club and the fans can never really get behind some sort of project here, because they always kind of know that it's just going to be taken apart at the first chance here. So I just think they're in this transitional phase where they just simply have to let go. And when that stage will come, we'll have to find out. They can get one or two good wins because they have got some good players. But I think when they do face a pretty good team, like what they did against Liverpool, they will just fall apart again. There's some big games coming up. We've got Spurs at home, Porto away in the Europa League, and also Villa. And then Brentford. Even Brentford is probably also a tough game as well. They've got West Ham, and they've got Fenerbahce, Chelsea. They've got some tough games coming up. And I can't see them doing that well. I think they'll get one big win. They'll probably beat Villa away or something randomly. But I think against Porto they'll lose. And I think against Spurs, that could be a big loss to them as well. So comment down below your thoughts about Ten Hag and United. I'm concerned. And I just can't see anything changing. So comment down below your thoughts. See you next time.